We start with the carnage in Chicago, chaos in Portland, violent crime surging in nearly every major city in America. Democratic mayors, Democratic governors, they have failed in their most basic duty, and that is their most basic responsibility, to maintain law and order. They have failed, and people are dying and being shot as a result. They have failed to keep their neighborhoods safe. They have failed to prevent violent crime. As a result, men, women, and children are dying. Our fellow Americans are dying. These mayors are literally twiddling their thumbs and playing politics. Philadelphia's top prosecutor is now vowing to arrest any federal law enforcement agents that are sent to the city. But President Trump is taking action. Today, in a major press conference, he announced the expansion of what's called Operation Legend. That's a federal program. It started in Kansas City, was named after a 4-year-old boy who was killed by gunfire while asleep in his own bed. Well, they'll now send more than 100 federal officers to Chicago, 35 to Albuquerque, where they're having a problem, in order to help take violent criminals off the streets. Mayors aren't doing it. The governors aren't doing it. Listen to the president.
The citizens of Chicago are citizens of America, and they have the same right as every other American to live in safety, dignity, and peace. No mother should ever have to cradle her dead child in her arms simply because politicians refuse to do what is necessary to secure their neighborhood and to secure their city. Every American, no matter their income, their race, or their zip code, should be able to walk their city streets free from violence and free from fear. For this reason, today, I am announcing that the Department of Justice will immediately surge federal law enforcement to the city of Chicago. The FBI, ATF, DEA, U.S. Marshal Service, and Homeland Security will together be sending hundreds of skilled law enforcement officers to Chicago to help drive down violent crime.
Safety, security is the foundation for our great American dream. Every child, every neighborhood, every city deserves to be safe. You can't climb the ladder of opportunity without security and safety. This president committed to making serious progress all over the country. Let's go back to his conference earlier today.
My vision for America's cities could not be more different from the lawlessness being pushed by the extreme radical left. While others want to defund, defame, and abolish the police, I want to support and honor our great police. We want to build factories in Baltimore, not Beijing. We want to make our products in Chicago, not Shanghai. We want the American dream for American children, and I will fight to deliver that dream. Every ounce, every single ounce of my strength, I will be fighting. But opportunity cannot thrive where there is violence, prosperity cannot flourish where there is bloodshed, and security cannot exist where there are violent criminals who are able to maim and murder with impunity. That is what Operation Legend is all about.
Operation Legend is a beginning. It's greatly needed in all of these cities. Now 100 agents. They cannot save and protect these cities. They can't. They can protect, well, federal property. They can help in investigations. They can get to underlying groups that are fomenting this violence. But unless and until these reckless, irresponsible Democratic mayors and governors do their job or allow the help they're being offered, they are allowing innocent people to die. That is all on them. New York, Chicago, Philly, Baltimore, you name the city, Seattle, Portland. It's all on them, especially true in Chicago. Shootings are up 47% over last year. Homicides up by a whopping 51%. 70 shot last weekend, 63 the weekend before. Even children are dying every single week. The violence reaches catastrophic levels. By the way, last night we reported on the horrific mass shooting in the south side of Chicago. 15 people seriously wounded outside of a funeral home, what appears to be a gun-related incident. At least 60 shell casings were recovered from the scene, caught on camera by a nearby surveillance system. Take a look. lightweight isn't doing anything to protect her city. Moments later, two visibly shaken witnesses compared it to a war zone, as the president's been calling this, and applauded the president's plan. Please help us. Please send in help. Well, the mayor and governor won't let him do that. Take a look.
We wish it would stop, and that we're glad the federal troops are here in Chicago because the violence is literally just as worse as the pandemic. Yes. And so, I mean, we need more cops and federal troops because it's literally like we're in Iraq or something.
Yes. So, it feels like I thought I was in a war.
Yeah.
In a war.
As this devastating scene unfolding, sadly a typical night, Chicago's mayor, Lori Lightfoot, who's a lightweight in terms of protecting people, busy on Twitter. What was she doing? Bashing President Trump, tweeting, "Under no circumstances will I allow Donald Trump's troops to come to Chicago and terrorize our residents." She clearly hates the president more than she cares about innocent men, women, and children in her city. Rahm Deadfish Emanuel, he didn't do anything either. Barack Obama as president barely mentioned Chicago. Thousands shot, thousands died. Biden did nothing. At the point, when will these liberal mayors and governors, when do we hold them accountable for not protecting innocent people? Hundreds of people shot every week in Chicago and a lot of these cities. 6 small children have been killed in July alone. Last night, a 3-year-old little girl was shot in the head, but the mayor is worried about troops terrorizing her city. Really? Now, what has she done to stop the violence? What has she done to save lives? Lightfoot, who's a lightweight on protecting citizens, seems more worried about optics and politics than the men, women, and children that she is supposed to protect and serve. It's a national disgrace. She's not the only Democrat putting politics before human life. In Portland, we see the same thing. Democrats there, they're apoplectic that federal agents would try to protect federal buildings from being burned to the ground. That is their right and their job. Portland's mayor calling the federal officers there, literally the officers, not the anarchists, not the people involved in the violence, calling the officers un-American. Oregon's stupid governor floating an insane conspiracy theory that they were abducting people. Pelosi, get this, comparing agents, law enforcement agents that put their lives on the line to protect and serve stormtroopers. Congressman Clyburn, another leadership in the Democratic Party, referring to them as Nazi Gestapo. Meanwhile, corrupt and confused Joe Biden, he's not said a single positive word about law enforcement, the 99%. Since running for president, he accused federal agents of, quote, brutally attacking peaceful protesters. Now, we also have heard him say that police have become the enemy, and he supports the defund effort, or as he calls it, we will reallocate resources. He likes that word better. Let's be clear. Anarchists, vandals have been rioting for nearly 2 straight months in downtown Portland. They firebombed a federal courthouse twice. They possibly permanently blinded federal officers with lasers. Dozens of buildings have been vandalized, lit ablaze. Businesses, they're shut down. People don't feel safe. These are not peaceful protests, Joe. And here's just a small example of what law enforcement is facing. Take a look. Wait till you see all the video with Ami Horowitz, who's on the ground in Portland as we speak. There have been more than 50 straight days of violent demonstrations in the city's downtown district. Remember, according to Biden, it's federal law enforcement officials who are the real enemy here. See what's happening? Biden doesn't have a plan to stop violence, make America's cities safer, to protect innocent people, so he just trashes Donald Trump. Now he's even deploying one of the old Democratic Party favorite tactics. He's now playing the race card. I pointed it out. I've done this history so many times. Every 2 years, every 4 years, like clockwork, Republicans, they are racist, sexist, misogynistic, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic. They want dirty air and water. They want grandma and grandpa to eat dog food, cat food before Paul Ryan or a Republican or Trump lookalike throws Granny over a cliff in a wheelchair. And today, Biden accusing Trump, the president, of being the first racist president in history. Get ready for a Hannity history real lesson in a second.
We have racists, and they've existed. They've tried to get elected president. He's the first one that has. and the way he pits people against one another is all designed to divide the country.
Put you all back in chains? All right, now it's time for a Hannity history lesson. Forget the fact that Democrats have accused every Republican of being racist. We've gone over since 1998, radio ad in Missouri, the 2000 James Byrd ad. Al Gore, Republicans don't even want to count you in the census. They'll put you all back in chains. Let's go over the facts. Here's Joe Biden's history. It was Donald Trump, not Joe and not Barack, who passed criminal justice reform and prison reform. It was Donald Trump. It wasn't Joe. It wasn't Barack who signed off on police reform. It was Donald Trump also doing opportunity zones, targeting mostly minority neighborhoods to help, well, build the economies in neighborhoods that have been left behind by Joe and Barack. It was President Trump, not Joe, not Barack, who ushered in record low after record low after record low unemployment for African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, women in the workplace, youth unemployment, African American youth unemployment. Joe and Barack, they didn't do any of that. Matter of fact, 13 million more Americans food stamps, 8 million more in poverty, lowest labor participation rate in, since the 70s. And a 51-year low in home ownership rate and the worst recovery since the 40s. That's their 8 years of failure. And by the way, 3 years in, President Trump has done more for minorities in this country than Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and Chucky Schumer did in 125 years. Watch this.
You look at employment, you look at opportunity zones, and maybe most importantly, you look at criminal justice reform, you look at prison reform. I've done things that nobody else, and I've said this, and I say it openly, and not a lot of people dispute it. I've done more for Black Americans than anybody, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln. Nobody has even been close.
The media mob, they're the biggest contributor to the Biden campaign and all things radical, extreme, democratic socialist. They'll never tell you that. So you need to ask yourself a question. What was Biden doing during his 50-plus year career in the swamp for African Americans, other minorities? Here's where it gets interesting. Tell all you Democratic friends, we know he was very close and spoke so highly of the former Klansman, Robert KKK Byrd. Yep, former Klan leader. Biden called Byrd the dean of the U.S. Senate, a close friend of mine and a mentor. That man filibustered the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that, well, Lyndon Johnson needed 80% of Republicans in the House and Senate to get passed because most Democrats, a lot of Democrats were opposing it. During a speech, Joe Biden in 1973 praised Southern Democrats, said the two-party system in the South was, quote, well, good for the, I won't use the word. Around the same time, Biden was actively working with desegregationists. He didn't want integration. He opposed school busing, according to NBC News. He led the charge on an issue that kept black students away from the classrooms of white students. That's his record. 77, Biden worried that his children, if integration, would grow up in a, quote, racial jungle if integration is not done in an orderly way, whatever the hell that means. 1993 referred to inner city youth as predators on our streets as he co-authored the most aggressive crime bill that ramped up prison sentences for dozens of crimes, specifically targeting, in the end, minority Americans. In 2006, telling a crowd, oh, you have to have a slight Indian accent to work at a 7-Eleven or Dunkin' Donuts. I'm not kidding, he said. 2006, he bragged his state was a slave state. 2007, he actually said this about Barack Obama. The first mainstream African-American who's articulate and bright and clean. That's storybook, man. Wow. Last year, he said poor kids could be just as bright as white kids. And recently, you ain't black if you support Donald Trump. Joe decides that. Joe Biden shouldn't throw stones from that glass house. That the mob and the media will never tell you. Better yet, he could just stop saying racist things altogether. Joe, take a look in the mirror. When is anyone in the mob and the media going to ask him about any of these things? Because that's the truth. That's the history. And by the way, actually, who knows if Joe Biden can even form a answer to any of these questions? We're going to play his very latest struggles in a moment. It's not good.